I have something for you to watch. And as you're watching it, please stay tuned, because as soon as it's over, I have an invitation for you that I think you're going to find important. So stay on, because we've got something significant for you to see. Quentin, the audience who's listening to us probably don't realize that you are in the ministry. You've been in the ministry a long time. You're currently a bishop, an archbishop, and you have done a lot of work across the world. I'm particularly touched by a story that happened in Uganda some years ago when you were ministering there. I think they call the place a prayer palace.
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Does that indicate the way the people in Uganda prayed or were committed, or how they exercised their faith?
That was in Uganda exiting some of the civil trials that had there years ago. Bishop Musisi started these network of churches, and they were just known for spending days in prayers. And several hundred churches that Bishop had, and they were very, very rural, bush-type people. But in Kampala, they had this major work, which major meant they had a tin shed, and then when that got filled, they built another tin roof, so they had water running down between about 4,500 people. And they were just known for their deep desire for a move of God. I mean, a lot of these folks came out of those woods and trees with AIDS, deformities. And so I went in there on a Sunday night, and it was one of the most interesting places. 114 degrees or some under this tin.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's hot. Lots of elders set up here on the right side, and they bring out this praise and worship choir, and I mean, they sang for 2 hours. And I thought, okay, here we go. And that was the warm-up choir.
Yes.
They paused and prayed for about an hour, Robert. And I thought, okay, here we go. And then they bring out the real choir and dressed, and they sing another 90 minutes.
Oh, my.
And when they get done with that, and they take them away, they must have brought in 1,000 children, lined them all up down here, and now pray. We prayed over all these children. And then they took that all away, and they came out with these great big tuba sixes with halogen lights on it. And they were broadcasting that service. So they had these halogen lights, and then they started carrying in people that were quadriplegic on mats, people that were all contorted and never
Twisted
walked.
bodies.
Yes, just, every kind of grotesque thing you can imagine. And they brought them, they laid them right there. Well, I've never done this. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And that auditorium, as it were, they were translating it into 3 different dialects. Swahili, I won't remember, but so you'd speak and there was these echoes that were.
Yes.
That. And I was speaking on the anointing of God. The anointing breaks the yoke out of Isaiah. And I'm about 5 minutes into this, and I look down, and here's this little girl. Later, I find out she's 14, never walked, never talked, and she's just all twisted.
Yes.
And I was so moved by that, and she's trying to raise this hand, just kind of up across her body. And I stepped 6 or 7 steps down off that platform, and I grabbed her hand, and without thought, literally, if I thought about it, I wouldn't have done it. Without thought, I threw her. And when she hit the ground, she started running.
She what?
Started running.
That's what I thought you said.
It sounded
running.
like two-by-fours. As I sit here and remember, it sounded like two-by-fours crackling as those legs and those arms. Robert, I'll never forget it. And I remember standing there as she's running down that, thinking, well, how did that happen? I mean, I was trying to, I really wanted to know, okay, now, what did I say? What was, because I was trying to think, okay, what's the formula here, right? Because I'm going to be the next greatest healing minister of all time. And that wasn't going to happen. And she jumped and started running, and when I looked up, that whole crowd started moving. And when that crowd started moving, then the elders began to come around me and pull me back. And they began to fashion people to come by. And they, in that setting, what they did is they'd walk people by you and you'd lay hands on them. And so they'd bring people by me and they'd lay hands on them. Robert, I prayed 3 hours for people. I was so tired. And by the time 2.5 hours go by, now they're standing up holding me, taking my hands and putting my hands on these people. And these people take a step or two and then kind of stumble and then kind of pull them off to the side. That went on for almost 4 hours.
Well, Quentin, what do you now think made that happen with that 14-year-old girl? Is there any way to understand the dynamic that went on as you prayed for her?
Little old man, little old African-American man, this all gets done and I'm sitting here and I'm tired and I'm sweating. He comes up and he sits down right here. He said, young man, he said, that had nothing to do with you. He said, we told them that the man of God was coming. He said, we told them there was a great man of God coming. And they've spent the last 2 weeks praying and believing that God was coming to visit them. He said, don't you go home and think this had anything to do with you. It had to do with their faith in God. I really believe that. I didn't go back and start some big healing ministry. It would have been really wrong of me to have sold everything and gone to Africa and pitched tent. But they had such faith that God was utilizing this little boy that when they'd lay my hands on, they had 241 confirmed healings of AIDS that day. They had doctors standing right over there. And every time one of them, they'd pull them over there.
Well, you were in the southern hemisphere.
Yes.
Which is different from the northern hemisphere.
Very much.
And is it true that the people there were open and anticipating and believing in a way that unfortunately doesn't seem to happen very often up here?
Well, I think so. Open, unintimidated by somebody telling them it couldn't happen, unintimidated by what today I find religious arrogance. You know, we've grown so smart in our theology that we have a tendency to answer away why someone doesn't get healed. And who knows? There's a lot of reasons why someone doesn't experience a miracle. But the truth of the matter is people still do, and it's still a mystery. And so I think people in that southern hemisphere, they're just unimpressed with our intelligence. And they are desperate. They are desperate. And in that desperation is this simple faith, just this simple faith. And I believe I just happened to be the individual there. I don't think I was anything special, just willing to be there. And so I'll never forget that old man saying...
Well, desperation is an idea we could talk about as a word, but desperation is an experience.
Yes.
I think does something to people, opens people, it breaks and cracks their presuppositions. And that's what you were seeing with that whole congregation.
Yes. Yeah. There's just all of them willing to go across lines of what is accepted norm. Supernatural. You know, if you go look up the word supernatural, one of the definitions of it is a departure from norm.
Yes.
A departure from norm. And what I think I saw there in Kampala was they were willing to depart from the accepted general rule of the norm because they were desperate. They had to.
And at that point of desperation, there was this openness that the hand of God could reach in and touch and empower.
Yeah.
Well, I think people who are listening to us today out there, I think there's all kinds of people who know what the meaning of desperation is in their own experience. Yeah. And what you shared with us ought to give them a direction to take that openness and reach out through it and receive whatever God gives back. Thank you, Quentin. This is very helpful. Thank you, sir. I hope you found what you just saw to be inspirational and be encouragement to you. And I'd like to hear from you. Please write me at Miracles Never Cease, Box 2, Bethany, Oklahoma, 73008.